Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world and when you watch our chat. I'm Krystle from Team Accelerate, online HR platform to help you unlock your HR potential in your business. And today we have Dr. Monty Badami joining us from Habitus. And Monty is one of my favorite people in the whole entire world. So we've just spent 30 minutes chatting, and we're going to spend another 30 minutes chatting live so that all of you can get the pieces of gold that he has to share with us. So Monty, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Do you want to give a bit of an introduction about you, about Habitus?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hey, Krystle, thanks so much for having me. I really love hanging out with you. It's just such a wonderful opportunity to chat to you again. So look, a little bit about me. So my name's Monty. I'm an anthropologist. For those of you that don't know what anthropology is, essentially we study humans. So we study humans in terms of our evolution over hundreds of thousands and millions of years, our evolution as physical, biological species with all of our flaws, but also how this physical species has been able to adapt and change and deal with all the major challenges that life and the environment and society has put up against us, and to survive in the context of all of those challenges. But also, you know, how these biological humans have been able to spread to nearly every square inch of the earth, and survive and thrive, not because we've done the same thing in all those different places, but survive and thrive because we've been able to do things differently. So a big part of what I do is understanding human diversity, challenging the idea that there is only one way of living, only one way of being, and really celebrating the fact that humans have been living in very complex, challenging worlds, in a very complex, challenging world for a very long time. And so humans have this amazing superpower to be adaptable, to be agile, to be communicative, to be collaborative, to embrace and handle change. And it's that kind of philosophy that I bring into a lot of the work that I do. I was going to say, the other thing that I think I should mention is that I'm also an officer in the Australian Army Reserve. So what we've done is I've been able to draw in a range of techniques and learnings from my training in that space to deal with things like strategy, team building, being able to define an objective and achieve that objective. With safety and with minimal expensive resources. And so I like to combine that anthropology and that strategic thinking that I've gained and the leadership models that I've gained from the Army. And we use the business Habitus to help businesses and communities and organizations just be a little bit more human and get stuff done.
Yes. And so today we're actually going to talk about how you include your team, why and how you include your team when you're doing your business strategy. So let's start with, what does business strategy mean in relation to your culture?
Yeah, it's a really important one, and I'm glad that you framed it like this, Krystle, because one of the biggest challenges I come up against when I'm working with businesses is that they always make this kind of division between strategy and culture, and we see them on LinkedIn. Strategy eats business, culture for breakfast. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Everybody's eating everybody for breakfast. But I wonder how useful it is to break it down like that, and whether or not we can have. There is actually so much more potential in embracing the complexity of both strategy and culture. To embrace the complexity of the circumstance that we're faced with, so that rather than reducing it to simple things like trying to get complex situations and give them simple solutions, actually saying, you know what, let's sit with the complexity and find solutions that are able to adapt and move with the complexity of the situation. Now, because of that, I think for me, business strategy, we need to have a strategy, for example, to shape and shape culture. And we need to have a culture that is inclusive and enables this continual flow of information, not just information that is kind of funneled through an individual or a sort of I like to call them hero-based, ego-based leadership structures. what we then have is we have a group of people who are all sensing and experiencing the world and feeding that information back to the key decision makers. And that decision maker is able to draw on a robust set of information that doesn't necessarily confirm their existing beliefs or worldview, that might actually challenge the assumptions that they bring into the situation. And by creating a culture where we can leverage the wisdom of our team, where we can challenge assumptions, where we can actually embrace failure as a necessary path to success, and where we can create the conditions where we can actually have healthy conflict, then we level up our ability to deal with some of these complex situations, and we level up our ability to come up with more robust and usable strategies as we are continually meeting this dynamic, changing world that we face with.
Okay. I don't think I have any questions. Hey,
there's a lot there, right?
There is, yeah. It's a lot to kind of take in.
Yeah, go on.
Well, I was just going to say it's an interesting way to come at business strategy with culture.
Yeah, and look, and this is where, so we get, like I said to you in the time we were talking beforehand, like everybody reads HBR, everybody reads Fin Review. We all know like team of teams, distributed leadership, innovative, agile thinking. Like everybody knows the words. We all know that leaders need to be more like coaches. That we need to empower. We need to actually create the conditions where people can make decisions for themselves and feel more engaged, by having that competence, that autonomy, and that connection. We know all these sorts of things, but the challenge, the stumbling block I always come up against is that we know the buzzwords, but we don't know how to put it into practice. And for me, that's where the culture piece is so important. Culture is the thing that shapes the behaviors. If we just use it as like as a buzzword or a tick box that we use to say that we're doing leadership, as opposed to having like an actual strategy to build that culture and nurture that culture, we start to see that strategy and culture are connected in a really powerful loop, and they contribute to each other in really important ways. A lot of these buzzwords and stuff, they come from, say, the military perspective of the team of teams, devised by Stanley McChrystal back in the early noughties. They've been developed by organisations like McKinsey through their ideas of the network of teams approach. But the truth is that they are not describing or creating something new. They're simply describing something that we as humans have experienced for a very long time. And all I need you to do is think about when you were last in a really awesome team. When you last felt like you were an organic part of a much bigger thing, where it's almost like you didn't even need to talk to each other. You could read each other's body language. And in doing so, you were all feeding off each other, and you're all kind of using each other as information sources to constantly move forward in an almost organic way. So it's really hard to get our heads around when we're stuck in like old school thinking about business strategy and leadership. And so what I like to do when we work with business is really get them connected to the experience of it.
Yep. And so does that all then feed into why it's important to include your team in your business strategy?
Yeah, it's a really, really important first step. Again, the big stumbling block is that in order to have an empowered team with distributed leadership, where we're all kind of working towards a shared vision, we all feel engaged, we all feel connected, we all feel autonomous, is that we have to take that first step. And that first step is having that inclusive team. As I said before, humans have not just survived, we've thrived, and we've thrived because we haven't done things the same way all the time. We've thrived because of our diversity. And so our diversity is important to us, not just on a biological level to deal with viruses or pathogens or whatever. It's also really important on a cultural and a cognitive level. And we're seeing that in the world today with where people get caught up in their echo chambers and they can't really see the forest for the trees, and they've got this kind of tunnel vision. Whereas if we have more diversity, and more importantly, it's not diversity in name alone, but where people actually feel like their perspective is valued, then they become part of the story or the narrative of that business, or they contribute to the strategy in a way that says, you know what, boss, you can't see this thing that I see because I'm on the outskirts here, and there is a massive risk here, or there is a massive opportunity here. You can't see it, but I can. And if their perspective and their contribution is valued, and that information is fed back into that central decision-making process, then we can come up with much more robust plans and strategies.
And not only that, I read a post on LinkedIn this week. A CEO of quite a large business jumped back down into a technical role just for the day. And the information that came out of that, or the experience that came out of that, was that he recognized that he no longer has the skill set to be the technician. It's all rusty and old, and so his way of doing things was outdated and inefficient. And it helped him to respect those technicians at that lower level, because they are good at what they do, and his business wouldn't be where it was without them. And it also then helped him to, bring them up to the next level as well, by providing a different insight from that higher level of the business. So,
and that's right. And the great thing there, Krystle, is it's not just the leader bringing up the subordinates, but we're all bringing each other up, right? This is the beauty of an awesome team. If we can trust the professional mastery of the people that we're working with and really value their contributions, then we level up our own capabilities as well. And we have to ask ourselves, like, who are we in service of? Are we in service of maintaining our own, hierarchical position in the organization, or are we in service of a greater mission, or in service of the customer? Are we service of a higher purpose? And in doing so, that requires a level of humility. And I think this is where, there was a great article on LinkedIn the other day as well about how great leaders need to be anthropologists. And I can't help myself. Me, I've got to stick in an anthropology like wherever I can. And this is because anthropologists, the way that we work is that we actually go out and we spend time with people. We live with them for long periods of time. We actually learn about their culture, and we learn about their, the stuff that isn't talked about, the stuff that isn't necessarily written about, but the stuff that is lived, the stuff that people know in their bodies. And the truth is that the team members that you're working with, they know stuff in their bodies. That's why they can react kind of almost instinctively to stuff. And we need to start to trust that. But in order to trust that, we need to experience that. We need to honor that. We need to value that. And the beautiful thing about the anthropological perspective is that, by kind of getting like a worm's eye view, we call it, by getting a worm's eye view of what's going on, rather than this big, massive, design-based strategic view of things, we can actually see things from a different perspective. And by allowing ourselves to see things from multiple perspectives, we can make, there's a saying in anthropology, we make the strange familiar and the familiar strange. What that means is that we can challenge the status quo that can kind of keep us trapped in a tunnel vision, or trapped in kind of orthodox thinking that isn't able to deal with the natural inevitability of complexity and change that we in this world now have just had to embrace, because all of a sudden with COVID, the strange is familiar and the familiar is strange. So we're actually at a really potent period in history where we can all be lay anthropologists and see things from different perspectives. And the great thing about that is by taking a step back from the norms, we can kind of see all the different things. We can find patterns, and in doing so, as I said before, having more streams of information coming back to us, we can see those patterns and be much more responsive rather than reactive. It's a much better strategy to be responsive than reactive, right? And the more we do it, the more we embed that into our culture, the more we include our team, the quicker that response time becomes, to the point where it almost feels like we can see around corners. Our response time is so quick, it's almost like that we're predictive, but we're not. We're just able to handle the complexity of a constantly changing world full of challenges, which humans have always done, and to do it in real time, because we're not funneling all that creative energy through a heroic ego-based leader. We're enabling the team to be part of that process. And this is where, including the team in the business strategy requires cultural humility, acknowledging that our culture isn't the way that we have done things is not the only way to do things, right? It's a very dangerous
Oh my
thing,
God.
right?
See that all the time.
All the time, right? All the time. But also intellectual humility. I have expertise, but that doesn't make me an expert of your experience. You know, and so I can actually leverage that and learn from that and actually grow as a leader through connecting with you and your experience in the workspace.
Yeah, and a prime example of that, which I've seen a lot, the difference between a health and safety expert and, you know, a construction expert, where a lot of the times the health and safety expert will come on site and right? They're not a construction expert. They don't know how to, whatever it is they're doing, digging holes or, you know, whatever. And so, you know, the best way around that is that mutual respect of expertise, because the health and safety expert is an expert in health and safety, and the construction expert is an expert in their fields. So you need to work together rather than that traditional, very old school sense of hierarchy.
Yeah, 100%. Those hierarchical structures serve a purpose in certain areas. You know, like, and I think it's important to recognize when they are valid. You know, there are simple situations that are best served with simple solutions and processes. We have best practice in certain things for a reason, right?
Yes.
But then there are more complicated. I'm drawing here on the Cognitive Edge. They're a great organisation in England. They have this framework known as the Cynefin framework. We use it in the army. I use it in the work that I do. It's a way of dealing with complexity. It's a basic complexity theory. The idea is that we have simple solutions require simple actions. Yeah, complicated solutions actually require a bit more expertise, where we can analyze. We have someone who can analyze the situation and then they can respond and act, right? Or you know, categorize and then respond, right? Then you have complex situations. And in complex situations, like, we actually need to set the conditions where we can have some safe to fail experiments to work out what to do, so that we can then, you know, understand what's happening and then act. And then, of course, you've got really chaotic situations where you just need to act in order to get to a place of stability where you can start working out what you need to do. Now, the point of me saying that is that I deal in the space of complexity all the time. And so for me, it's always about having those safe to fail experiments. When we're dealing with in the agile space, it's all about complexity. But it's also really important to know what your business is doing and what the conditions are. If you're dealing with simple stuff, simple approaches, well, they work. But we know when they stop working. If we keep using simple solutions for complex problems, we're probably just going to keep bashing our head against the wall and there's going to be no movement.
Yes. Okay. So when you do include your team in your business strategy, what can you expect as an outcome, generally speaking?
So I need to be really clear. I think, and this is one of the things that I have to set a lot of my businesses up for, is you have to expect a bit of anxiety, uncertainty, and discomfort. Because you are making a major change to the status quo. And this is where a good strategy can help with the development of a more inclusive and empowered culture. This is where I say they work together. And having a strategy gives you that sort of stability to go, okay, we know why we're doing this. We know where we're trying to go. And these are the things we're going to do along the way to get there. And so it's okay to acknowledge that we're not going to feel completely sort of secure as we get there. And to be completely honest, I don't think that a really innovative or adaptable company is ever going to feel completely safe, because if you are on the edge, the cutting edge, you're always going to be at the vanguard, which means you're always going to be an imposter, which means you're always going to be exploring new territory, which means you don't have that stable sort of platform of simplicity to rest on. And so, you know, this is where I would say, you know, embrace the discomfort, embrace the complexity, embrace the insecurity as a necessary path towards it. Because as leaders, we need to let go of the power in order to empower others. And a big part of that is we're not the ones that will decide what the team necessarily needs. And by creating those really powerful, respectful, open feedback loops and constantly getting the information from the team to tell us what they need, to tell us what the situation needs. We are constantly testing and adjusting to meet the needs of the circumstance or the mission or the objective that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And something that I think is really powerful that I just want to bring back, and it's something that was taught to me when I started diving, is that you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because once you sink into that comfort of uncomfort, there's no easy way to say that, but once you are comfortable in that space, it just happens. And it's really magical when you let it happen.
Yeah, look, we have a we have a couple of frameworks. We've worked before. You've seen these ones. So we have a brave conversation framework. It's one of the things that we use. We didn't design it. We've borrowed it from other places, but we use it to help build that culture of inclusion and contribution. And then the big ones are, stay engaged. That means and there are some things around that, but more importantly, speak your truth. Listen for understanding, expect and accept discomfort, and expect and accept non-closure. These are things that are really important if we are going to deal with those complex, innovative spaces. And it ties in with a lot of stuff we do in emotional intelligence, which is if there's no such thing as good or bad feelings, they're just challenging feelings and not so challenging feelings. And no matter what the feelings we have, if we are constantly running from our feelings, then they will control us and we are being reactive. But if we can sit with those feelings, then we can actually learn to accept them, embrace them, make them a part of our experience, and we can be much more responsive. And again, this is where I have to, like I say, the cultural transformation piece is not just about the boxes and the policy documents and all that sort of stuff. It's about a real transformation at the level of the individual. And as individuals, we have to undergo a transformation. And all the emotional intelligence and communication stuff, well, everybody's like, well, they're just all warm and fuzzies. They're actually really important aspects of the strategy.
They are. And I don't want to start a conversation about women and men in the workforce, but what you just kind of said was, masculine people, male or female, are solution focused. So they want that closure, whereas feminine people are more about we don't really need closure per se. We can just sit with that and see where it takes us. So important to have a balance of masculine and feminine energy in any kind of, in your home, in the workforce, in sport, in life. So,
100%. And we did a lot of this work together, right? Like we've been around in this space together. And I think this is the thing is that this is why the cultural change piece is so challenging, because the norms, the kind of corporate business norms are highly competitive and they are highly gendered. And this is where, to be successful, you kind of have to be masculine gendered in lots of space. And we used to have those conversations in the work that we did together. And this is the issue is that we've created a status quo that maybe doesn't serve us anymore, right? And so if we can create the space where we are inclusive of those different perspectives, those different mindsets, different bodies, different experiences, we can challenge those assumptions. As I said before, leverage the wisdom of those different people. And we have to create the conditions where we can have healthy conflict. We have to be able to disagree. And again, the other big piece of that, Krystle, is embracing failure. I know as well in some of the places that we worked together, it was like the word failure was like a massive trigger. But we know that, like organizations that don't have a tolerance for failure have people who either hide their mistakes or are too afraid to take risks. And we have to understand where the acceptable level of risk is. But we have people who are afraid to innovate.
But how do you learn? Like another adage, when you're in the dating world, how do you know what type of person you want to be with if you don't experience different types? How do you learn if you don't make mistakes?
And this is why it is. No, but it is and it isn't. So for me, the strategy and the culture piece also incorporates, and we did this, where we really incorporated the reflective practice. The honest self-reflection around, well, what worked, what didn't work. Like with some of my coaching clients, it takes me 3 weeks for them to come just to accept the possibility that things that they do don't work. I'm like, well, how are you going to accept it's not working, mate? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so having the courage and the safety, and this is where the emotional and psychological safety, again, really important part of the strategic process, but also the cultural process. People need to feel emotionally and psychologically safe to be able to do all those things we talk about. Yes. And this is why the box ticking simply doesn't work. So what can you expect? If you do really want to do it, you need to have the integrity to commit to it and to relinquish that power.
And walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Yeah, right.
Big one. All right. Lastly, because this is probably, something that is massive in that a lot of businesses start out, you've got 5 to 25 staff, business strategy and culture, amazing, because there's a small amount of people doing the doing. But once you start growing and you're hitting 100, 200, 500, how do you make it work?
Yeah, so I think the phrasing of this question is really good, because how do you make it work as your business grows or when your business grows is a much easier question to answer than how do you implement a complete organizational restructure on a massive organization that all of a sudden wants to have distributed leadership, right? Yeah. That's a much harder gig. Requires a much bigger investment of time and energy and transformation, and you're going to lose a lot of people, because a lot of people are in those big organizations because that's what they want, right? With the ones that are growing, though, I think it is about, and this is where Stanley McChrystle's work on the team of teams approach was so good, is that he said, because they were getting really bogged down with bureaucracy and the way that the army and the defense force was working in Iraq. And they knew that the way of doing things was actually slowing stuff down. There were too many silos. There was no communication, and they couldn't seize the opportunities of individuals on the ground who were like, I see a thing, there's an opportunity or there's a risk, we got to do a thing, right? And it would take days before they could do it. The opportunity was gone, and they're dealing with an enemy or a threat level that is able to move very quickly and adapt very quickly. And so we superimpose that onto a world where we are dealing with customers and circumstances and challenges that are moving and changing very quickly. And we need to have that same capacity. We need to have the ability to have the same level of empowerment and information feedback flows that we have in those small specialized teams, but also allow that to happen on a larger scale. And a big part of that is the empowerment piece, and that empowerment means the individual leader needs to relinquish some of that power and really, embrace those diverse teams, empower them to start making strategies for themselves and experimenting, having a bit of a tolerance for failure, so we can define, what is the safe to fail stuff we can do. But also having connections between those teams. So what we want the connections within teams to be as strong and valuable as the connections between teams, so we can cross-pollinate ideas. So that feedback flow and that information flow is not just from people in your team. It's like, hey, what are they doing in finance? What are they doing in safety? What are they doing in L&D? What are they doing in design? And by giving people the opportunity to step out of, their sort of domain of expertise and actually learn and grow from the domain of expertise of others, we start to find that real collaboration taking place. But this too is a culture piece. This is a piece that we can build from the bottom up. It's much harder to change from the top down. And so, but this is where I say that in order to make this work as your business grows, you have to make it work right from the start. You have to really invest in that culture. You have to really invest in that inclusion. You have to really invest in that transparency, and you have to let go of some of those things that make us feel really awesome as leaders.
Yeah, and I think culture and strategy investment is no different to investing in your product and service, investing in your systems and processes, investing in your brand. It's just another aspect of your business that you need to invest time, energy, and money in.
Absolutely, and I think the reason why people don't is, one, they can't necessarily clearly identify what that return on investment is. And the other thing is that they lack the confidence or the ability or the knowledge of how to do it. And that's where we come.
Yes, it does. All right, that is 30 minutes.
We nailed it, my friend.
Nailed it. High five to you. Thank you so much for your time. Again, I really appreciate the wisdom that you bring in and the alternate ways of thinking and challenging the way we do business. It's exciting. So,
real pleasure, and it's always so much fun hanging out with you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for watching. If you watch the recording later on and you have comments or questions, put them into the comment box. We will always answer them. And we'll put a few links into the posts in case you're interested in reading any of the things that Dr. Monty was talking about. So enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.